The second panel will illuminate how already European movements are shaking up the politics all across Europe. Today we have representatives from Italy, Switzerland, and the UK discussing and showing how in their respective countries politics have been changed through digital movements. Ulrike Guérot will present and discuss these ideas together with the participants. Ulrike is one of the leading voices in the current discussion on the future of Europe and is a renowned researcher in political sciences. Silvan Gisler, who joins us from Switzerland, not only has a family from the mountainside and knows about people who wouldn't actually be able to follow us in an English conversation, probably not get half of the stuff we're talking about. And he's a former journalist and now a political campaigner with Operation Libero, which has been able to challenge the main political populist leader in Switzerland to our great surprise, using Facebook and other digital technologies. He will explain to us how they did it. Before that, Fabio Chiusi will start the panel telling us more about the famous Cinque Stelle movement, which has become probably Italy's most powerful party in the last 10 to 15 years, again using a platform-based approach. And it's not even a party, it's actually a platform. He will explain to us how that worked. And Carole Cadwalladr is one of Britain's foremost journalists, and she's been continuing research on the role of data analytics and the people behind those data analytics that we mentioned in our early report, famously known as Die Bombe, from December 2016. And she's done such amazing work that now she's under some legal difficulties, but I'm hoping that you will be able to talk freely here in Hamburg. We'll be recording this, though, and it might get published, so just if there's anything that you have to be careful about concerning Trump's and Mercer's lawyers that are going against you and The Guardian right now. So Ulrike will lead us and will lead you a path into that new world of politics. And it's actually not only in Switzerland, the UK, in Italy, it's also in France with the Mouvement that Macron has created, it's Podemos, and it's probably AfD in Germany, probably also the Piratenpartei all across Europe. Thank you so much, and wishing you a great start now. Ulrike, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, Hannes. Thank you for having me here. You find yourself already in a pretty disrupted sort of feature and arrangement. I'm sorry for those who are back to me because you have sort of not my eyes. And it just resembles that we are disrupting the party because we are used to parliaments where we have an amphitheater and then we have sort of from right to left the parties in a classical alignment and everybody knows where stands who and it's very easy. So now, these Agora format, we will need to restructure the modern party system where nobody knows where people stand, sort of ni droite ni gauche, Cinque Stelle in the middle of nowhere or somewhere. I mean, it's the question of basically what we are trying to address, which is where's the amphitheater, where's left, where's right, where we are in this disrupture of parties. And the disruption comes pretty much through the internet and through new ways of designing politics. So without further ado, I hand it over to Fabio first to give us impressions from Cinque Stelle, and then we go over to Carole to have her thoughts about free speech in basically in these days of party disruption. Thank you very much. Fabio, go ahead.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me here. It's a great honor, and I'm among these panelists. And what I would like to say is trying to do an anatomy of a digital movement, one that actually isn't a utopia, but it's a reality. Most of these parties or digital movements are informed by some kind of cyber-utopianism. And these guys pretty much turn the utopian vision into a reality. And some may argue it's a dystopia instead. I will say there are a lot of problems out there. But first, we have to understand what's going on. And what is the five-star movement, or Movimento 5 Stelle as it's called in Italy? I would say it's like an anti-establishment party. We can see exactly. It's an anti-establishment non-party that aims to fundamentally reshape the whole democratic process, the very idea of democracy via the internet, and do away with the representative democracy that they argue, and possibly rightly so, that doesn't work anymore in Italy, and replace it with a form of direct digital democracy which structurally depends on the internet. It's also a way to try and do away with formal hierarchy of any kinds, especially inside traditional parties, so that their main motto used to be, at least in the past, I don't know now, uno vale uno. It was uno vale uno, which means one counts as one. Everybody has the same amount and wields the same amount of power inside the party. And as we will see, it's not exactly like that, but still, many outcasts and many outliers came forward, and and a whole new political class came forward out of nowhere, basically, just with a YouTube video and an online application. So how is it digital? And no, first we can say the numbers just to get a sense of what I'm talking about. Getting 8.7 million votes, like 25.5% of the last political election, in just 4 years. It's true. Beppe Grillo, who is this guy, is a former comedian, very famous in Italy, who set up a blog which became one of the most read, I think, worldwide, surely in Italy and Europe. And he started getting into politics and political arguments, and tried to hack the Partito Democratico by trying to propose a platform. It was rejected. And in the end, he said, I'll try to set up my own non-party or movement, first through regional or local movements with his name, and then through the Movimento 5 Stelle. As of now, it elected 2,200 representatives with over 130 members of parliament, 15 members in the European Parliament, and 36 mayors in various towns. Among them, of course, Rome, the capital, is now a mayor from Movimento 5 Stelle, Virginia Raggi, Turin, Livorno, Ragusa, many others. And these are like some numbers to give you a sense. But then we can switch to why it is digital, actually. And it's fundamentally digital, I claim, because, for example, its headquarters is a website. It's beppegrillo.it and now movimento5stelle.it. The way in which it is regulated is through an online non-statute, they call it, non-statute, because it's something that has, just to remind that it's different from a party. Its core, it's a web platform. They call it operative system, but it's actually not. It's not something that makes a computer work. It's like something that makes a democracy work, in their opinion. And it has the name of a famous philosopher, Rousseau. And formally, Rousseau is like a kind of heritage of a network of communities on the Meetup platform that used to coordinate the various instances of the party on local level. And now the Rousseau platform is very big. It has, I think, 150,000 subscribers that are registered, and they actually participate in all the steps of the democratic process. They can propose law, they can discuss laws that are proposed by elected representatives. They have an e-learning platform for people to try and understand how it actually works to be inside the parliament. And they want to open it like a can of tuna. That's their main claim. They want to be inside the institutions to basically destroy them and reform them completely. this platform had already 300 laws discussed, more than 80,000 comments. Of course, many of them are, I completely agree, I'm fine with that, it's amazing, or fuck politicians, you know, things like that. And 2 laws that have been proposed by users have been actually brought to the parliament for discussion, which is, you know, a good sign of democracy. And of course, we have like 140K participants, as I was saying, with the objective of getting 1 million by 2018. That's what Davide Casaleggio, the head of this of the Associazione Rousseau that manages the platform, says. And that is basically how it works, and also it is funded by the public and by its, of course, the one who want to vote for Movimento 5 Stelle. They managed to gather 430,000 euros from 14,000 donators for the platform. And most of them are, I went through all of them, most of them just gave 20 to 50 euros, basically. One gave more than 8,000 for some reason. Some others, like I think 20 or something, gave 1,000 euros or more, which is a lot of money. And still, since we're talking about parties and disrupting a party, this is of course a disruption of the traditional way of having a party organized. But yet there's still, I think, some kind of political party, I claim. For example, the regulation identifies in Beppe Grillo the capo politico, which means the political leader that has he says he's a kind of, he guarantees that rules are respected, he says, but instead, of course, he has a great power in shaping the way in which the movement is perceived, and of course, the topics on the agenda, and his blog is the agenda setting place of the Movimento 5 Stelle. And for example, his approval is required to make use of the symbol for new instances of the movement on the local level to appear. Also, we have 2 other councils, like the Comitato d'Appello and Collegio dei Provviviri, which are like small councils that help him with the voting process, you know, with getting the political analysis straight. And also a Comitato Operativo, or Direttorio as it was called in Italy, made of 5 members, and these 5 members became very popular in Italy, and they're all over the place. They started out, the Movimento 5 Stelle started out like saying, we reject the traditional media, we won't be present on TV, we won't be we won't be doing talk shows because we hate it, because they're corrupted, media are corrupted, this is the traditional, populist stance. And then in the end, they thought that without that, they couldn't have had like the very success they were expecting. And so these 5 guys became very popular in Italy, and they are rumored to be like the main candidates for prime minister in the next elections. There are many problems, of course, with this kind of organization. There are 2 great problems that have been highlighted, like very recently. One of them very recently. I will just keep and try to, if you want, we can get into the details later. The first one is the cybersecurity of the platform, of course, because if you have thousands of people, possibly 1 million people discussing on the same platform, you want to be sure that votes cannot be altered, that the data are actually protected, their personal data are protected, and they're not for everybody to see. And this has been proven to be wrong by 2 hackers, like very recently in Italy. One of them, a white hat, which actually found some vulnerabilities in the coding and in the programming of the platform, and just highlighted it to the public, but without publishing the details of the vulnerabilities, just communicating them to Casaleggio Associati, which is the company that actually manages the whole website structure. There are a lot of websites. I think we have, here it is. We have Beppe Grillo's website, we have Rousseau platform website, we have the Movimento 5 Stelle website, we have Blog delle Stelle, we have many Facebook pages, we have also other websites that are managed by Casaleggio, and they are constantly used to spread propaganda in favor of the Movimento 5 Stelle most of the times, or aggregate news that are consistent with the worldview of the Movimento 5 Stelle, Tete, La Cosa, La Fucina, and many of them pushing the issues out there, And of course, and all of them are managed by Casaleggio Associati, which is the private company, a web marketing firm, basically, which was headed by Gian Roberto Casaleggio, who now unfortunately died. And it was the co-founder of the movement together with Beppe Grillo, and informed the whole ideology, the whole cyber-utopianism of the ideology behind the movement. And of course, what the hackers showed is the vulnerabilities, and the company said, okay, I'm threatening to sue. We're threatening to sue. Instead of making use of the first rule of cybersecurity, which is making use of good hackers that highlight problems in your infrastructure, they threatened to sue. And then another hacker came forward, with this time a black hat, and he actually showed data and published them and released them online on Twitter and other platforms, actually arguing and showing that it could manipulate the voting system, and it could see the data. At times, the passwords were even saved in the clear, and not even hashed or something, or they were crypto. The crypto they were using was with very old algorithms, which were not useful at all and could be deciphered very quickly and easily. And the other problem, of course, and then I will stop for the moment, is that there is no clear separation between this private entity and the idea of a participatory movement held by the public and regulated by the public and by the people that decide on the platform. The platform itself is not open source. They're proprietary platforms. We have no idea of the auditing system of the voting systems, and also the fact that, for example, people can get expelled from the movement via online polls on Beppe Grillo's blog is highly problematic, of course, because there is no real way to check what went on in the votes, and even the way in which the questions were posed. At times, they seem to imply the answer. Do you want to expel this guy who's been bad for this and this reason? And of course, it doesn't take a degree in cognitive psychology to understand that the question is implied, the answer is implied in the question. So for the moment, I think I will stop here and not take too much time. But these are very, very problematic issues, and especially if you think this is one of the most powerful examples of digital democracy all over the world, maybe a world first. We need to be studying these things very closely, and I think without political prejudice, we trying to argue and understand whether this kind of infrastructure is actually good for democracy or is actually good for killing it. Thanks.
Thank you, Fabio, for giving us the Italian case. And as you say, it's not only the Italian case, because there's Trump, there is Kunz in Austria, there's Macron, there's Le Pen, there's the Neos in Austria also. So I retained 4 points from what you said. Let's try to structure, and then I hand it over to Carole. Person before party. It all goes around a person. Huh? So person before party, and then around a person you start a movement. The second is the very strong egalitarian sort of strain. Yeah? One person, we all want to be seen, but then the question is, what about hierarchy? Is there any hierarchy in these structures? The third is direct democracy, which is Rousseau is back. And Rousseau is back also in terms of, science, literature. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Rousseau these days, even in, in the scientific community. And then the fourth, and that would be my point, is where goes the power? It goes into a clan. What you said about this, 5 people surrounding him is basically no more hierarchy, but you still have power. But the power is, in a way, animal farm. Some are more equal than others, although the movement pretends to be egalitarian, right? The fifth point I would structure is, and then I hand it over to Carole, is abuse. Right? Because all you pointed out is about instrumentalization, about websites, wrong information, and so. And with abuse, I think I gave a keyword to Carole.
Thank you. It's very good to be in Germany. It's quite exciting for me because I think people here have got so much of a sort of have got a much more sophisticated understanding of the sort of dangers, I suppose, around all this, and much more so than we have in the UK. And I apologise, I haven't got the slick presentation, and so I'm just going to try and tell you the story, really, of what I've been doing since December, and when I fell down this really weird wormhole into this world of fake news and harvesting data and billionaires and Facebook and really sort of trying to look into what happened around the referendum in Britain and also a bit around the Trump election. And it all started back on a dark winter's night in December when I'd been asked to sort of look into it. It was just after Trump had been elected. And of course, everybody was like, fake news, what is this thing? And I was Googling around it. And then I started Googling Google. And I came across this very weird set of results, which I couldn't quite believe I was seeing. And I was Googling things around religion. And I put into the search engine, "Are Jews?" I think was the thing. And Google suggested the search I was looking for was, "Are Jews evil?" And I was like, well, it wasn't my question. And I pressed on it. And I got a whole page of results saying, yes, Jews are evil. And that was the top results down there. And I was like, what is this crazy thing going on? And it was happening across all sorts of different news and information searches. And that was when I stumbled across an academic a couple of days later in the United States called Jonathan Albright. And he'd been mapping the entire kind of news and information network. And we came across each other in another very late night call. And he was kind of freaked out because he was like, this is much, much bigger than fake news. This is systemic. And there's a structure here which is sort of crowding out and suffocating the information network, the mainstream source of information that, that we've been used to. And there's something very sort of weird going on here. And he was the first person who told me about this company called Cambridge Analytica I'd never heard of. And he said, well, it was this company, it was involved in Trump and in Brexit. And what they do is, they harvest data and they can track you across the internet. And then with all that information they've scooped up about you, they then target personally to you advertisements in Facebook or in your browser. And it's based upon things they know about you. And so they're able to sort of manipulate you in really sophisticated, personalized ways. And anyway, I wrote this piece. And then very shortly afterwards, people kept on sending me this link to this German article I couldn't understand by Hannes, who's our chair for the day, which he had written about Cambridge Analytica. And he'd done this amazing job and had found out how they had harvested millions of people's Facebook data and were using that to kind of build their models and then send out that information via Facebook. So this was my kind of starting point. Anyway, but I started in the meantime getting these weird letters from Cambridge Analytica saying, sent to the editor, and it's saying, we never worked on Brexit. They said, we didn't work for the Leave campaign. And so the Reader's editor came to me and said, well, what's going on? Did they or didn't they? And I was like, well, this is very odd, because on their website, they had a big thing saying, oh, and we worked for the Leave campaign. And here's the CEO of Cambridge Analytica saying, yes, we're very proud of the work we did for the Leave campaign. And the Leave campaign, one side of it, we had 2 Leave campaigns in Britain, but our sort of like far right-wingers from UKIP, they had an organisation called Leave.eu, and on their website it said, yes, and we hired this great firm called Cambridge Analytica. So we just couldn't work out what was going on, and we kept on going, no, here you say you don't, they did work for you. And they kept on writing back to us and saying, no, we didn't do any work for them. So eventually we got hold of somebody from the Leave campaign, Andy Wigmore, and I just said, well, can we go out for a coffee? Can we talk about technology? And can you tell? And he said, and basically in the course of that, he said, no, we'd never hired Cambridge Analytica. They were happy to help us because they're owned by this billionaire called Robert Mercer, who is the main donor for Trump. And their aims and our aims were really closely aligned. So the Trump mission and the Brexit mission were kind of one and the same, in a sense, and so they were happy to help us. So I kind of went away, and then I thought, I was just like, is that legal? And I rang up our electoral commission, and I said, if it's a gift of services, if it's a donation, and from a foreign billionaire, is that allowed? And they said, well, no, that's not allowed, that's actually illegal. And so in the wake of that article, then a legal investigation got launched. 2 investigations got launched into into what's happened in the referendum and this Cambridge Analytica's role in it. And I don't want to go on too long, but those are ongoing. As a result of other articles I've written, Cambridge Analytica then started threatening to sue the Observer. But it's this really, I mean, I just want to sort of talk briefly around this. What happened in Britain was that this technology had overturned essentially 150 years of legislation that we had in place, which was all about ensuring a free and fair election. And that's all about controlling the money. So in Britain, we have this idea of we want a level playing field and no side has an unfair advantage. You can't just buy an election, and because that's what used to happen in the 19th century. And what's happened is with Facebook and these new technologies, it's just possible to pour money in ways you can't see and you can't track. And, you know, and that's essentially, you know, what seems to have happened is that billionaires can buy influence through these platforms. And one thing we do know is that to a lot of the questions that I've been kind of digging into and can't find answers to, is that actually Facebook does know the answers to these things. Facebook knows what happened in terms of in the election of Trump, and you know how the data of people was found, how people were targeted. It knows in Britain. In France, interestingly, just before the French election, Facebook, I don't know if you remember, they dismantled 30,000 accounts, which were fake accounts, which were bots. And but that didn't happen in Britain, and it didn't happen in America. I'm not sure what's going to happen in Germany, but. So, sorry, I'm bang on again, but I have got a link through to the 5-star movement here, which is that, so leave.eu, after the referendum, they then decided, right, we're going to create a new movement, and we're going to particularly attack all anti-Brexit MPs. And they actually went to Italy to study the 5-star movement. And they like this idea of a platform. And for all the reasons I think you're talking about, which is you don't know, it's opaque, you don't know what's behind it, and crucially, you don't know where the money's coming from. And I actually have a link over to Paul here, which is that I'm sure that you can come back to me on, which is that so they wanted to do some of that money for this campaign through crowdfunding. And of course, crowdfunding is a brilliant way for the little person on the street to get involved and to diminish the role of these big billionaires like Robert Mercer. But it does also suffer from its own questions around transparency, I suppose. But I'm sure Paul will come back on that. And I'm going to leave it there, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Carole, for this in-depth look into how billionaires can basically buy elections and vote and influence. And just to structure this panel, I repeat my sort of points with which I would like to structure the discussion. The first is person come before party, Trump, Kunz, Macron. The second, egalitarianism, yeah, so people against the lead, one person, one vote, Rousseau is back. But the third is the power is with clans, yeah, so, and the clans is what you basically, the little structure of the Cinque Stelle, but you could probably make the same case for Trump, Bannon, and the clique surrounding Trump, and you can pointing to Brexit. But what you basically gave us is an analysis of the fourth point, which is abuse, and how the abuse basically goes. And it goes through power, which is money power. It goes to firms who can harvest data, so there's a money impact. So basically it's a capital structure here, because if you have capital, then you can go to companies and you can make companies work. The figure I have is that the Cambridge Analytica initially had something like 15 million or so to go for the harvesting of data in the Trump election. So somebody needs to pay these 15 millions, and if you then say that there are billionaires doing this, then there is billionaires basically buying the system in the sense that it gets systemic, that you have a way that the data come out and so on and so forth. So through algorithm, basically you buy the outcome that you want the system to have. And here's my, before handing it over to Fabio, is the question. Because if this is true, what we are basically learning is that we, in more in the sense of more political science, what we are facing, and you come last in this session just to explain, because your task on the panel is to give us the positive version of this negative example, but here is the negative thesis. And the negative thesis is, are we facing a situation in which basically millionaires, or let's call it the 1% elite, or however you want to call it, is able to instrumentalize the losers of modernization? Yeah, to their own detriment. I mean, everybody knows that Trump is not doing good policies for the people who vote him because they will not get health care, they will not, you understand my point, yeah? So the thesis is that these billionaires are not ready and willing to pay for what we could call social democracy any longer. So rather than sharing money, yeah, and basically fueling democracy through some social care, what they do is buying votes, and they go for a national neoliberal agenda. So what we see is a conjunction between a neoliberal argument, which is in the policy arena, combined with a Kubernetic argument, which is this algorithm thing we are talking about. And the two together go for something that you would call a national neoliberal sort of agenda, which has a very tough economic driver, and this very tough economic driver is the 1%, to make it very overshot. Okay, I hand it over to you to give us the positive outcome here.
Thanks. Yeah, hi, I'm Silvan. I'm from Operation Libero, and I'm the optimist. Maybe we'll figure that out today. Well, what is Operation Libero? Operation Libero is a political movement from Switzerland, and don't be disturbed that here's the Eiffel Tower. It's just one short thing I want to show you, that it was when Macron was elected, we made a Facebook Live session, and we also sold there our socks. You see the great pink socks, here they are, and we made them on Christmas because we wanted to have presents for our supporters, and we didn't have money, so we produced them and sold them on Facebook, and then again and again. And that's just two examples how we work, and two examples that without Facebook, our Operation Libero, our movement, and the things we reached, the things we succeeded, wouldn't have happened that way if Facebook wouldn't exist. And it wouldn't have happened because we started with no money. But just to explain what Operation Libero is a liberal movement. We are value-driven, we're content-driven, and we like to celebrate, especially when we're winning, but we're also celebrating when we're losing, but it didn't happen right now. And it's important to say that we're value-driven as a movement, and that we're content-driven, so it's clear for what we are standing for, and it's not like, and we have a agenda. It's written and made by our members, but it's already set. So it's not some kind of, we don't have a platform where people are having their own thematic issues, and we're discussing about it. So this isn't kind of the democratic approach. We said, this is our agenda, these are our values, so who wants to be part of this movement can be part. And within this movement, there's a lot of democratic ways how you can participate, so it's really easy to get in, it's really easy to make something. We don't have a strong hierarchy in the organization. Well, but what we are doing campaigns, and we decided to make these campaigns because after elections, after votation 2014, when people voted for against mass immigration, and we decided, well, this was kind of a Brexit moment for Switzerland, or a Trump moment for this, and we said we won't let this happen again. The politicians failed, the parties failed, and other NGOs failed, and we said we won't let this happen again. We want to go forward with an own agenda, with own framings, with own slogans, and because we won't let the field to the right-wing populists. Then we can go to the next Well, it was a campaign against an initiative from the right-wing party. This initiative wanted to get all the criminal immigrants out of the country automatically. That would mean without having a right to present their case and stuff. So it would have been automatically throw out of the country. So all other parties said, well, it's about immigrants, you know, you don't have a chance to change this. Also, it was clear before that most of the people wanted to vote yes for this initiative. And so we said, well, no, we won't let this happen. And it didn't happen because with us, other organizations just joined, and then there became something like it was just like first it was our initiative, like a movement. We said, well, we won't let this happen, but then it came other people, other organizations came in, joined in, and it was a really politicized moment. And everyone in Switzerland had an opinion about this, and in the end we won with 60% no votes against this initiative, which would have been, in the beginning, it was really clear for everyone, for every expert, for every politician, that this initiative will succeed. Well, now how we did that and what's the issues about our organization, I can explain on the next. Okay, something happened there. I don't know. Well, how we work 100% fundraised, crowdfunded, so the people who are behind us, or the money who is behind us, is spent by the people who are supporting us. So it's we just counted it as kind of 90% of the donations we receive are lower than 250 Swiss francs. So it's really there are small amounts of donations we get, and we get them because from the beginning on, we said we have to have the people who are supporting us. We can't be a movement when we wouldn't be crowdfunded. With this money, most of them we spend online, because this is where our know-how is, and it's a easier and cheaper way for us to get active and to get more people active. And also, the other thing is that it's important to be offline active as well. That's what we learned. You can't be just online there. You have to go knocking on doors. And when we're talking about targeting and stuff, never forget that important parts of campaigns, also at Brexit, also at Trump, at Bernie Sanders especially, for example, is also the offline campaigning part, and both has to work together. As already mentioned, we're made by members, we're driven by volunteers, they also are in the lead for campaigns, and on the other side we have a professional team, mostly, who supports the volunteers to make these campaigns. And so we started with no money, but we started with content. That's an important issue for me. You can't win without content, even if you have good technical experts and stuff. If you don't have a content, you won't win. And with the technical know-how. The technical know-how I will describe just shortly, I think. And for us, we're not have the money like for targeting or something like this. I mean, Brexit campaign and Trump campaign, we're talking there about huge amount of monies. So we don't have this money. So we have to count on the multiplication. We have to count on the people who are sharing our things. And there it's clear that it's multiplication. That's the movement power who just make us the most influential political organization in Switzerland. And it's mail. Not just, and somewhere there it's social media. So we can create there an infinity loop. And this means that when you use social media and you don't have like a targeting system or you don't have billions to spend there, you have to look that there's an infinity loop. You have to look that everything is running and running. The people are engaged. The people can do something. They can subscribe for something. They have to do again something when they do it. So that's how you create an infinite loop. I won't explain it in details. You can ask later, but it's just to show how we work without with spending as less money as possible. Here we are 1,000 members, 3,000 actives, 5,000 donators. We have 6 employees. We have different regional teams. We have 8 task forces. We have 10 campaigns, and we won 3 major wins against the right-wing populist party in Switzerland. Yeah, thanks.
So, thank you, Silvan, and let me pick up here. So we started from instrumentalization, from sort of, let's call it the 1%, whatever, the billionaires or the Panama boys, whatever. We could observe that they can buy structures, media structures, and we observed that, and that was your point, that then they can run opinion in the sense that they instrumentalize losers of monetization, mostly with ressentiment against the others. That was the case of your referenda in Switzerland, which is against refugees and the criminals of refugees and so. So the ressentiments of the losers is instrumentalized against the others who need to be expulsed. Huh? So you created that platform, and I have basically, because we are doing now one round on the panel again, and then I will open it up to all of you. I have 3 questions considering it all, and basically starting from Silvan, because what you basically put then on the as facts on the table is that it's all online, it's all crowdfunded, it works with volunteers and multiplication and engagement. And here is somebody like me, born in '64, old party style, not new media, not understanding my own kids who are doing Bitcoin stuff and whatever, you know, and I struggle with the power thing. Where's the power in these organizations, yeah? Because I'm a clear fan of power, and that power should be structured and power should be somewhere. But I'm struggling above all, and it's take me as advocatus diaboli, right? With the factor of where's the institution? What are we experiencing here? Because what we are experiencing, that's my question to the 3 of you who are experiencing institutional dying. So we are experiencing the death of Max Weber, who 100 years ago said institutions don't die. Because what you are presenting here is fluid movements of different clans who build up through multiplication, and they are more or less invisible, these billionaires, we don't know their name. So what is the institution? Who has the power? And then please answer to me, but also to the room, the question, 3 questions. Is crowdfunding enough, the 20 euros, if on the other hand, on the other side, they're billionaires? Is volunteering enough? If you need institutions to last and you need to pay people to do work, or is volunteer thing only good for a certain action? You want to counter a given moment of a referendum, but can you build systematic engagement through volunteer? And what is engagement if you cannot bundle engagement? If 1 sentence more on that question. I see many activities online, or all these good people out there who want a better climate and, you know, migration and, you know, fighting against X and Y and Z. But what I do not see any longer is that any of these, say, good intention activities, which are all about online volunteer crowdfunding, that they can bundle to something which would be a party with power and institutions and influence. So that's the question to the 3 of you, perhaps in inverse order, and then I open it up to the public.
Yeah, I think first I would make a difference between, I think, of course, also in our organization, you need some leaderships. But it's something different, like to have leaderships for a campaign. to have leadership like for a special issue, but when you have, but on the other hand, you're open for everyone, and you don't have, they can, for example, run a campaign and be the head of a campaign when they want to. So it's, I don't think that it works without leadership, and this leadership has to be in an institutional case somehow. I think also. I mean, we are not a party, but we are an organization. So we have a personality somehow, but within these institutions, it's important that you have a fluid membrane. I think this is the case in organizations, this is the case in parties, and this is the case also for a state. I would say it have to be as inclusive as possible. When I say when your organization or your state shouldn't fail, you have to have inclusive institutions. I would say you need institutions, but they have to be inclusive. Well, crowdfunding enough. I mean, I'm not sure yet. We're figuring out that at Operation Libero. I'm really not sure, because you can't plan within 2 years. You can plan for 3 months or 1 year. I mean, I don't know how long they will be able to pay, for example, my salary. I don't know, and so I'm not sure yet. The volunteers enough. Also there, I think it's. We have professionals and we have volunteers, but there it's important that the professionals are there to support the volunteers, not the other way around. So it's not the volunteers who are supporting you, you're supporting the volunteers that it works. And yeah, I think that's it. Maybe I forgot something, I'll come back to that.
No. Many thanks. I hand it over to Carole, just stating that, say, the classical Parteizentrale, say, in Germany, let's say the Zentrale der SPD or CDU, Adenauer House in Berlin, is basically a huge building, which is real estate with many hundred people working there on full salaries, lifelong contracts, and so, which obviously probably has another systemic sort of factor. And it's not that I want to go against you, I just want to mirror sort of the movement fluidity versus the systemic institution gravity. Carole, it's yours.
It's great having, I love the way that you kind of encapsulated all things so beautifully there. And I think I'm just going to interpret some of your questions. So in terms of, you said you're really interested in where is the power? And I kind of would like to go back to the question which Richard raised, which is it nation states or is it big corporations? And by big corporations, I mean the big technology companies. And I think we're in a moment when it's really kind of unclear. And I suppose I'd be interested in what other people have to say about that. One of the spookiest conversations I had at some point this year was with a Danish defence analyst. And we were talking about what he described as absolutely that we're in the middle of an information war at the moment. And he said, and I said, well, if that's the case, then who are the most powerful actors in this? And he said, well, definitely the weakest actors are Western nation states. And he said it's because they're coming from a place of secrecy. They're just not used to this. This is all about openness and using these very open structures. And so Western nation states are kind of hopeless. And he said the Russians are pretty good at it. They've been practicing this information war for quite a while. And, they've pioneered these really interesting techniques. And I said, so who's got the most power? And he sort of gulped and he went, well, Silicon Valley. And I said, but militarily? And, I know we talk about economically, and he was like, yes, militarily. And I just that sort of slightly blew my mind. And this question about, is volunteerism enough? Well, there's two parts to it, which in terms of that, I think that the thing about the billionaires is that they're just really smart, a lot of them, and they've recognized this thing about data being money and data being the future. And so all the companies they're investing in building is all about harvesting as much data about all of us as they possibly can, even if at the moment they haven't worked out how to completely monetize that. They will, and also that is going to be power. And so I think the fight back from all of us around that is going to be really around this questions of data and owning our data. And then thirdly, the thing I'd say about volunteerism is just that the thing that I personally worry about in all of this, because it's very personal to me, is journalism and sources of news and information. And that is not free, it's really costly. And in America in particular, you know, these news organizations are doing amazing work on reporting on Trump, and so we're really lucky still to have them, but it's in real doubt because nobody's actually come up with a terribly good model of how we pay for this stuff. So I suppose that's how I'd answer that.
Well, thank you. I'm the least to be convinced that the nation state is it today, doing much research on Europeanization. Anyway, I hand it over to our Italian friend on data is money.
Oh yes, absolutely. That's what I was about to say. Thanks for the question. It was amazingly put. I think there is an instance in the history of the Five-Star Movement that proves where is the power. There has been an online voting through a poll for a candidate to the mayor, I think, of Genova or something, and I was sure it's in Liguria, anyway, on a local level, and the woman that actually won the vote online got disavowed by the capo politico, the political leadership, and she was thrown out of the movement basically, and another candidate took her place, just with the stroke of a digital pen, let's say, okay, by the capo politico. So the leadership actually resides. The result of all of this disintermediation is worse reintermediation, in my opinion, which means intermediation through institutions that have no checks and balances in place, not strong as in political parties or in traditional institutions. So there is
alone legal control.
Exactly, and so there's no actual way to control those who control the platform, those who control the data. There is no actual way to know whether the Five-Star Movement, for example, does something similar to what the Leave campaign did or Trump did. I tried to ask many times to many people. I only have suppositions. It's very possible, they tell me. It's also very possible they're not good enough technically to do that, because what they've shown in the way in which they manage the platform is that they're not that good in managing data or managing infrastructure. So it is possible that they're not yet doing it, but they will. But the point about power is that, you know, it becomes less checked, I think, and it becomes concentrated in the ones who actually manage the thing because they created it. So, for example, another way of showing it is how the leadership is renewed. When Gianroberto Casaleggio died, his son took his place, like naturally, with no one asking a single thing, you know. And it took a Spanish journalist to a press conference asking, "Who elected you?" Actually, no Italian journalist asked that, you know. I said, wait, who voted for you exactly? You're like representative of a private company or a public association which manages this platform, which happens to be in the same offices, would happen to employ the same people, you know, would happens to have basically the same name, you know, and who elected you? So that's for power. And the death of institution also is a problem to me. When you bring in massive digital democracy, there is consistent research throughout the decades now, way before the internet, that digital democracy turns actually out to be a dictatorship of those who have more time to waste. You know? So that's also a problem. It can be very positive, but it can also be very scary. And is volunteering enough? No, it is not. And they, for example, the Five-Star Movement knows it very well. Davide Casaleggio started talking to the big players in Italy, big economic players. They started to showcase its movement and have conferences about the ways in which to imagine the future, in which big players were present, in which trying to also have mainstream media journalists, you know, introducing the thing and being actually there, just as a way to say, okay, if we ever take power, you know, someone is going to take care of us. The way in which we will be treated will be different. And that's not because of him, that's because of the Italian media suck, basically. And so, of course, if they gain power, mainstream media will become much more favorable to them. And again, this shows that if you want to actually break a system that it cannot all be demanded and delegated to the people. The institution need to regain somehow their trust by renewing themselves through democratic means and processes, which are not all of them majority lead.
Yeah, thank you. So I pick this up. We need to regain some sort of institutional power in the new arena. We probably need to regain some sort of representation features in the new arena, which is the internet. I mean, that would be my sort of classical, where I come from, sort of position. And then I pick up and I open with the question for all of you on all this realm that Carole gave us, which is information war. Nation state is no longer it. I guess that the Catholic Church or the ISIS are better in providing information on the internet, both in whatever way. Religion always sells. Porn always sells. So there is a question about who gets the brains, right? And the question of who gets the brains of the next generation is always the question of who has, in the Foucaultian sense, the discourse knowledge, the order, who controls the discourse order, right? And if you can buy the discourse knowledge or the discourse order, this is Foucault at its best, basically you buy the brains and then you buy the truth, because you can determine what the truth is. And that, I think, is the struggle between fake news and is climate protection. I mean, is climate change happening? Is it not happening? Whatever. So with all this field being now really open in all its brutality, I open the floor to all of your questions. I can't see here, but Hannes is having the eyes over there.
Okay, let me start out with one reply rather than a question, because Carole Cadwalladr was actually addressing Paul Hilder, one of our panelists from the first round, with a question. Could you again repeat that question briefly so that Paul can answer? Just get closer to the microphone, please.
Yeah.
For the public.
Yeah, so I was just talking about how our right-wing UKIPers, Leave.eu, wanted to do a political platform in the model of the Five Star Movement, and they were trying to crowdfund. And because we've had questions about where their money came from for the referendum, it seemed as well that there was the possibility, although crowdfunding is this wonderful thing, could it also be a channel for kind of dark money, I guess?
Yeah, it's not inconceivable that it could be. I mean, I think that the Electoral Commission's requirements for political parties on reporting of funds help in this matter. I think there's a sort of larger question which I think you posed to me in the past about, should these people be anywhere near you? To which the answer, is I think of Leave.eu as warlord entrepreneurs, basically, in the political space. But we're an open platform and we're democratic, and we have to follow through on that principle, even with people whose values I would significantly disagree with. There's a line, right? If they were convicted of hate speech or electoral crimes, then we'd be having a different kind of conversation. But I also think there's an argument for people to be doing this kind of stuff more in the public domain rather than their own walled gardens. But this is really, really knotty and complicated stuff. I mean, again, I think the Five Star Movement are warlord entrepreneurs who have, over time, increasingly integrated real, large-scale, authentic participation and bottom-up dynamics, which I don't think Leave.eu have at the moment, but which they say they want to try and do. Now, if they did that, it might be scary for you and me, but would it be better than your hypothesis that maybe they're funded by the Russians?
Well, my question, I guess, is just that it's just we need these things, this grassroots funding. You need actual proper populism rather than this fake populism which has been harnessed by billionaires. But my question, I guess, is that if Mr. Putin or one of his proxies wanted to donate to some of these campaigns to get rid of the anti-Brexit MPs, could they do that? Could they funnel it via kind of your platform or other platforms like it? Is there anything to stop that?
And then if I may add
Yes,
another
sure.
question, because then there's a question sort of, is it getting any better? I mean, if you rightly say that perhaps Cinque Stelle brought in some participatory elements, I'm not too much into Italian politics, but it seemed to me that the Cinque Stelle mayor of Rome isn't the sort of brilliant star to govern the town, right? So you get more or less ordinary people who are basically failing in their jobs. Nobody says a word about it. I mean, you know, is this what we want? And then we call it civil society. I mean, is this any better than the people we have, where we had system in which we tried at least to bring skilled people into positions which care for the public?
Probably we separate those.
Yeah, but
Look, I mean, I think if I can sort of step back and give you a larger answer to the question, I think that a lot of the existing infrastructure of legacy politics has been failing to engage or excite the public or to solve some of the most fundamental problems in our society. It's sort of gone to sleep. And, you know, I talk as somebody who continues to be a member of the Labour Party in my own country, who stood as a General Secretary candidate for that legacy party, and who believes passionately that these things can be re-energised. But in order to re-energise them, you need to find some way of reckoning with the new sociology around you, the new problems around you, and not to fall foul of the iron law of oligarchy, which applies to political parties on the left as it does on the right, which is that you capture a certain amount of power and you start protecting that power, and then you go to sleep. So how do these institutions challenge and renew themselves?
And my question.
Back to the Putin question.
Yeah.
Could
And my
Putin
question.
use crowdpack to finance Aaron banks?
It's not theoretically impossible, but you and I should probably talk about that offline. I mean, the good news is that the Electoral Commission regulations require that original donations to campaigns which are affecting the prospects of particular candidates.
But is that only
have to
within
be
a regulated
disclosed.
period? Because when the whole thing in Britain, which has happened around the disruption of democracy through these online things, is that we had it so that you only had to control the period just before the election, but actually now the structures are kind of being built and that the money's being spent outside this period. So and our Electoral Commission has kind of very few rules over that.
It has too few rules, and I would agree with you that we need to improve that regulatory framework.
Thank you for this discussion. I think we are seeing a clear case where technology is ahead of the legal structures, right? And that's a common problem in mostly every country. May I have a question, Ulrike? May I just jump into your panel and ask you to detail just briefly, very briefly, the role of Casaleggio? So, because I think the audience didn't get it. As far as I understand it, there's a company, which is an e-commerce company from Milano originally, that is the original founder somehow of Cinque Stelle, even before Beppe Grillo. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, the history goes that Gianroberto Casaleggio, now deceased, but I think it was 2008 or 2009, he went to a Beppe Grillo show, and he went after the end of the show. He went to meet this guy who used to crush computers in front of people, you know, before that, and said, "Look, you have beautiful ideas in politics. You want to give power back to the people and blah blah blah. I have these ideas. Use the internet. The internet is gonna eat the mainstream media. Is gonna crush television. Is gonna destroy the party system. Is gonna change forever democracy." And this guy, he had a strong ideological background in cyber-utopianism, of like giving this hive mind idea of intellect, of collective wisdom when people unite. And he was even making videos about some kind of world called Gaia, in which in the future there will be apparently a war between digital democracies and authoritarianism of some sort. and that will be like the one event that will reshape our history or something like that. And then it all boiled down to a company that actually created the infrastructure of the Cinque Stelle. So basically, it's very messy and confused about who actually treats the data. Some sites are the domain name, some are registered to Casaleggio, some are registered to Beppe Grillo. Even Beppe Grillo's website is not is the main name. If you go to whois.com, is not his. It's registered by a guy in Modena who's completely unknown. And some critics argue is to shield him from responsibility. And when he got sued by the Partito Democratico, he said, "I'm not responsible for the post I write on my own blog that are not signed by me, because this is a political platform."
All right, so
it is very messy.
That's the point, yeah.
That's my key word, sort of the power of the people and then the power of data, yeah? So now I go unless I see the next sort of question here, but I give you the question to all. And if I were to say that power to the people is not a good idea, because the power to the people meant in 1789 basically Robespierre, and it meant in 1905 Lenin and Animal Farm, and some are more equal than the others, and it meant Pol Pot in the 1970s, where everybody who had a brain and would be reading were shot. And it doesn't mean a lot to in the US today. So I give you Platon, who was basically one of the first thinkers of democracy, which he didn't like too much. He liked the republic, which is a different concept than democracy. And the argument since basically Platon, or better Aristoteles, is that the majority of the street is no democracy. So if we organize through digital data platforms democracy in the way that the majority is democracy, then perhaps are we winning? Are we winning in that game? I mean, I give the question to you, essentially.
I've been discussing and thinking about that for quite a long time, and I try to figure out, like, who are the bad guys actually in this game? Are these the corporations? Are these like the Trumps, the billionaires, and I pretty much like saw today again when Antonio today asked who of us read the AGBs, the not code of conduct, the terms of Facebook. No one in here did, and I'm a journalist. I should read them. I actually read one time like something like that, and it's awfully written, but nobody really cares, because I think. You said about the crowd of the responsibility of the majority. What about the responsibility of the individual? And I think this is like we all are fake news. We are part of the problem. Neither if we don't care about it, we are guilty. Neither we don't read about it, we're guilty. Or we are deeply concerned about it, but we're digital illiterates, and we cannot express it because we're not, like, we like to read the Zeit and the like intellectual kind of thing, but this is not the world that we're living in today. So we need to step up our game in order to take, we need to charge, we need to actually do something. Democracy is not something that you got one day, and you have to really do your homework, and I don't see that happening. We all care about what's the newest iPhone. I see that in my ratings of my blog. But when I write about privacy, and like, who gives a damn? Nobody cares. So I think instead of blaming Donald Trump, instead of blaming the bad, they are just the smart people who are using like that vacuum, that digital vacuum that we all are guilty of having contributed to.
Brilliant point.
Is it only a digital vacuum, or is it a vacuum which has been always existing through different forms? Because I would make the argument that, say, if you look Hitler, yeah? I mean, he could do the Volksempfänger thing and would fill a vacuum, which by then was also there, and even without the internet, it just worked. And it worked precisely of the factor that nobody individually took responsibility, right? So I'm just putting into question whether it's the because that's our discussion, and I want you all to get in. But our discussion is the internet changing things, and is that the rupture of the party which we're discussing? So my counter thesis is, the internet is a new media which makes a disruption of party which we are experiencing, but the disruption takes place on another level, which is individual responsibility. And it's just the media which...
If I may jump in, here's the one problem I think, and it took me a long time until it actually snapped in my brain. You were just using the term, it's a media. The internet is anything but a medium. It's not. It's an infrastructure. It's a new. It's so not what we connect to the term media. We connect. It's yet, you know, like we had radio, then we had television, and so on. But the internet does not work that way. It's not top down. It's not like so. So I think this is huge. This is big. I think maybe in 200 years we will be only able to understand what this disruption is actually doing to all of us.
Mm-hmm. There's a question in the back.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. There.
I think one of the misunderstandings or misfocus that we have is that we always focus on the participatory aspects of democracy, and I think one of the ignored things is accountability. And we have a huge problem with accountability. And I don't really see how that can be solved on a digital platform. Basically, we have impunity for financial actors, for political actors, and that's, in my opinion, much bigger problem than the question of participation.
I give it to the panel. Second question. Okay, let's take this question then over there.
Thank you. So this is a very well moderated and very great discussion here. And Richard, I would go even further. So I would not say it's not only media, but it's what Ulrike is looking for. I think the internet might be my counter thesis here, is the power structure. So the internet was invented by the military and had some sort of hippie-esque era, which is coming to an end now, because as we saw in the discussion before, there's no more centralistic structure than, let's say, Facebook or Google, who say there's something in the cloud, yeah, which is probably part of the ideology because it's centralized in one thing. So the hope that we can use a centralized power structure to disrupt anything that it is embedded, I think it heads to the wrong direction because I think we're misled here. And we saw it here. Like who owns this structure or who can control the structures are not only brains but also technological people who need funding and have money. And yeah, the problem is there any, do we need any more technological advancements to disrupt this power structure? There are some decentralized ideas coming up. Or do we need more regulation to disrupt this centralization that is in the system? So I'm not quite sure about it, but I think there's some sort of blind spot, and you pointed it out with it's not a media. I think that's a good way to move into this thought. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent remark. Thank you.
Shall we give the two questions back to the panel to make a round of three?
Probably. If I may address you, there are 2 points about Operation Libero. So, talking about information war, it's actually interesting that Operation Libero, whose campaign in 2014 I was reporting about, they themselves called them warriors, online warriors. I would wonder why you're using this military technology, language, phrasing, and then. Yeah, his point about centralized versus decentralized power structures is something that I would love to hear from your perspective, because Switzerland has this great tradition, and also your structure is kind of like inverted. So could you describe that?
Yeah. First, I think I will go to the online warriors and connect this with Foucault and both questions. I think it can fit together, because I think we saw earlier today the triangle just reversed, so in the other direction, and I think it's just like when we had before, like when we said who has the discourse macht, who had this, it was in the hand of some on little big hands, some kind of. And now the structure changed, and now it's just like who makes the discourse macht. The discourse macht is being made in the internet by the people who are using and liking and sharing the content who is there. Of course, then the question is, and we're questioning this kind of, okay, are they biased? Are they kind of just someone who is influenced and is just doing it because because of the targeting, because of words have been made this way that he will do it. I think, but somehow it changed, and I think it's not. We should not just look at these people like they are biased and they're just influenced and doing it because some targeting said they had to do it. So I think we have to look at this also like the discourse macht is being made more and more by the people in social media and while interacting together. Of course, there are people who are influence it. And so the online warriors question is something about this also, because we have the online warriors, I explained, we have them, there are volunteers, they're going to social media, they're discussing with the people, and they're discussing, of course, with our arguments. And we say them, they have to be polite, they have to take the others serious, but they're arguing with our arguments. So is this something better than like targeting to, or is it better because we have, from our perspective, better goals? I don't know, but I think it's important to do it because it's important to discuss on social media, and it's important to do it like personally, and of course, because of the discourse macht. And so, yeah, I think there's a question about, is it good or bad? Does this depend from where it comes from? I don't know, right? Would it be good when the Cambridge Analytica would work? Don't know, for Amnesty. I don't know. And the other thing, like from the structure, I think, Hannes, to understand you well, you asked me about because our direct democracy and our how we work in the organization with structure.
Your full-time members are supporting the volunteers, not the volunteers are supporting.
Yeah, I think I really believe in that. Of course, in everyday business, it's not always like this. Of course, not. I think then sometimes we're changing the roles, and then we say to people like, okay, there are our volunteers. We want to make them to do that, but in fact, we then see there. People who can think. Of course, we have a lot of smart people who want to join and participate in our organization. So it's some kind of, easier to get them to give them responsibility. And I really think that it works this way, that when you give them responsibility, they will give you something back. I think it wouldn't work when you say, oh, they're just a mass of people who we can influence and say them, go there and tell this. I really think so.
There's a question.
I know, but okay, let's take this question in, but then I would also like the panel to react to the previous questions, okay? Perhaps?
Okay, I'm wondering if I'm too optimistic, because I don't want to doubt what Richard was saying, what Carole was saying, but it's like, I see a certain kind of pessimistic view on the future, on the near future. And 2 years ago, I would have agreed completely. But I think, maybe it's naive, but I see a certain backlash. I think we've seen, in the way they use technology, in the way they used activism and also strategy, we saw the right-wing populist movements being further in the future. They knew how to use it. They used it on Brexit. They used it on the US elections. But I have the feeling that we're picking up. I see tech people from Berlin, from Hamburg, becoming political and using their tech abilities that they have never used before in a political way to use it in a political way now. I see people connecting, because when you see, I don't know, I think it was someone in the first panel showing this interaction graph. You can see the like brown networks, how they work, how they can set agendas on Twitter, on Facebook, because they are interconnected, and they like much better than a liberal or social democrat or green movement is. But I also see some picking up in that area. So am I too naive? You know, it's like, isn't it just like we saw someone beginning with someone and now we're picking up, and it's going to be more equilibrial than
Shall I come in?
1 year ago? I don't know.
Shall I leap in there a bit? So I think just to say that my entry point into this was I come to it from the angle of being kind of a techno-utopian. I followed the journey of these amazing, technologies and the ways that they've kind of harnessed, it enabled people. We hear from people now in a way which we didn't before, and that's been kind of amazing. But I think what the difficulty as I see it is around the fact that these things are owned by private companies. It's these black boxes, and so we don't know what's going on inside them, and they are owned by people and they're owned by corporations. And as Fabio is saying, that's just kind of problematic because you don't know how they work, and that they can be gamed. And so, it's brilliant. It's like you say, it's that, yes, actually, this is kind of energizing lots of people, and it's great to have that kind of backlash. But I think if you talk in terms of power structures, which goes back to your question, is that I'm not sure, because the power belongs to the platforms. And as much as we, the people, can use those platforms to do things for good, just as people can use them for things for bad, it's the platforms which are the things here which we have no access to. And, they're powerful now. What are they going to be like in 5-10 years' time? You talk about how amazing it is to have volunteers go out and talk to people on social media and engage them. And it is, but there's bots who do that now, which are indistinguishable from real people. And I don't know if you've seen the video technology, which is kind of coming, whereby you can take a video of anybody, of Obama, and you can have him spouting alt-right nationalism, and it looks like it's him speaking. And that's going to be flooding the media, and we're not going to know what is true and what is false, and that is a way to manipulate people. That is what we are seeing happening now. It's what we're seeing happening in America. And so it's absolutely great, and that's what we do all need to do is, and especially those talented technology people that you're talking about. But I think you can't underestimate, if it's, as I say, if it's bad now, think of what technology is going to bring us in the next decade.
Let me pick up here to not perhaps some things together and then give it back to the floor. But picking up on, we will need to assess 200 more years to what the internet does to democracy. But, between the invention of book printing to Gutenberg and French Revolution is sort of 200 years, yeah? So the impact of the media on the given form of democracy is something, and we are in the middle of the process, and I'm thankful for the question over there with respect to re-regulation. I mean, are we able to re-regulate the internet as a platform as we were to regulate, say, the radio? I mean, at the beginning, radio waves were also just not a medium like a medium in terms of a journal which is structured, but were a tool, right? But then radio was structured. Not everybody had access to a mic. We still have Rundfunkräte in Germany. We control what is emitted, yeah? We do have a real control of, you cannot say everything into a radio mic, yeah? But you can do all sort of shit in the internet. And I think, yes, sure. And I think we can go with Carole that the line between what is false and what is true, which in epistemology is anyway a very, very hard sort of thing. I mean, if you go deeper into science, sort of about what is our, dialectic between the object and the subject and what we see when we see things. I mean, there's a huge sort of science question out here, and whether we will ever be able to say what is true and what is false is perhaps an illusion in itself, because things happen to be true only temporarily for our sort of common collective awareness. But given this broader epistemological question sort of aside, we were at least in the current, say, what we call democracies, we were able to have a certain truth. We would say more or less in the era I was born that the US is rather good and the USSR is rather bad, and we would call us free and the others not. I mean, we had some sort of true-false schemata which are all breaking away, and I think that is the question that Carole put on the table. So,
can I jump in
who
on
wants
this?
to step? Obviously, everybody's happy. I only speak as long as I see a hand rising in the room. That's my role.
I mean, we cannot surrender politics, though, Politics is ugly business, but not everything is movement-based, or not everything has to come from the people. And not everything is debatable, We're not into some kind of unstoppable cultural relativism. For example, if you want to do something good for the internet, you have to be sure that cryptography works. When you have democratic government trying to weaken cryptography, structurally, just to give people or in the intelligence agencies or in the governments access to any kind of communications, even those that should be protected, that is unequivocally bad, and that shouldn't happen. When you try to break net neutrality, the principle that there should be no discrimination on bits, on any bit or on any content that flows through the internet, this is unequivocally bad. It's good only for some big players that want to decide what you'll be able to stream, for example. There are some very easy points to retake and regain, and we should be starting from democracies, because democracies forgot these points in the quest of security, of anti-terrorism, which is a false quest. You can't just read away everything that's happening on the internet and then say, okay, this is a terrorist. It doesn't work that way. We never have an algorithm that way. And plus, there are many things that can be done to reestablish some kind of democracy on how these companies work. We don't live in an economocratic society in which companies decide whatever they want. They have to live under the rule of law, and we can open up the algorithms in which they choose our lives. Bots can be regulated. Political funding has been regulated, can be regulated in the era of the internet. My point is we have to regain some kind of utopianism about these things. We need to absolutely be concrete and visionary at the same time, and it is possible. There are many things that can be done. The thing is, we never argue about this thing, and we always stop about how bad is post-truth era, which doesn't exist. What was totalitarianism? For example, that's not about the internet, and not everything is about the internet. Most of the things are about bad politics, or bad politicians, or bad ideas that have been pushed forward in the void.
Okay,
we should gain something like this.
Let me push you on this one. I couldn't agree more. I think what we come up with is Derrida, which say we need to strive for. It's impossible, but it's necessary. It's necessary, but it's impossible. So even if it's impossible, we should try to restructure the internet in the way we structured our own old media, the radio, whatever. But here's the point: as somebody trained in political science, I would say go pushy and say there's no such thing than democracy. Elites tend to grasp power, and then the question is, do they use this for good or do they instrumentalize people? That's the sort of indifferent question of how power works, and so we are confronted with that power question again. And we are lured into an idea that democracy is something about egalitarian, and then we think like a platform is the best thing to go for egalitarian structures. But here again smart people, you mentioned smart people, tend to grasp power. And the only question is the moral one, which we had, is do they use this for the good of the people or do they instrumentalize them? And the internet hasn't gotten the answer to that very question. But I think I still have 10 minutes to go for last question.
I think we should encourage the audience. We're kind of like probably were flying around, and there are people asking, having questions.
Well, I always looked around and I didn't see sort of
probably
the hands rising.
We should ask them right now. Hey, we're just learning about an interconnected set of so-called movements that work in European politics very powerfully. Don't you want to learn about how they function? Here you have your experts. You can ask them all sorts of questions.
I'm going to put out a request is, can a woman ask a question? Because one of the problems with technology is that the people who've kind of become the victims of it, largely, are the people who kind of weren't in the room when the technology was being created. So it's just really important to have more different kinds of people in the debate. So that's my personal request, was if there's just to try and even things out a bit. No. Well, I gave it a go, at least.
Okay, we've tried.
And then there's the question about digital divide. Huh? My mother is no longer in. Huh? She's not in the room. So what do you do with people? I mean, if we're changing about all these movements, what do you do with digital divide, which is...
Yeah. Well, I think I had one aha effect. It was when we just asked our supporters how old they are, because we actually don't know. We just know where they live and their names. And then it was they're between 18 and 30, and then again 55 to 70. And I didn't know that, I didn't have a clue, and I think it was really surprising for me, because I thought, like, well, we're always talking about we want to reach everyone, but we have an online campaigning organization, so we have kind of a bubble. But actually, half of the people are between 55 and 70. And I can't explain it yet. Maybe they're doing more writing. They're writing back better than the youngers. I don't know. Maybe this is, but just like I think there is a division. I think, but there's also kind of a chance. Also, others became older people said, well, I actually did not knew how this Facebook works, but then I saw that you make something there, and I joined, and then I think now people are getting into it again. And just something other, I think, like the internet is just, I think it's giving more possibilities for good and bad, and it's like it changes structures, right? And I think Johanna asked me also why we say online warriors like the military terms, and I think it's really kind of a battle, I guess, but it's not a kind of a battle of good content, bad content. It's kind of a battle of discussing on a level of facts or honesty and respect, and we say to our online warriors they have to do this, or just acting with bots and just having with the only goal to manipulate, or with targeting with the only goal to manipulate. And I think this is kind of a battle who's going on, and just maybe online warriors, we have around 200 persons in Switzerland who's doing this for us right now. Maybe you can do 200 bots in don't know, in an hour or something. But at the moment it works, and I think this is just one possibly answer to questions of insecurity about how this will going on. And there I agree with you that we have to go back to this possibility and thinking that we can do something.
Thank you. Here's a question.
A question from the audience, hooray. Yeah, the title of this panel is Disrupting Democracy Through Digital Technology, and what I was thinking about is that a disruption of the status quo is not necessarily only a dystopian thing. It could also be a utopian thing. But when you look into the current state of the world, if you can do that, you see multiple crises and people are insecure about the future, and now we are even insecure of our institutions and of our democracy, and how is it all going to work out, and now crazy people like Trump can go run for president. And when I watch this and we are discussing now the possibilities and the power of the internet and all the mechanics that are now behind that can take control of what we think and where we go and what we look at, and also can collect so much data about us, and that I was thinking was a very important point, will be there forever, unless someone burns down all these server farms. They're not going to go away anymore. And for me now the question is, there's now some sort of vacuum, there's no vision that I can see. We're going to have parliament elections soon. And I can look into all those programs from the parties that are running for parliament, that are going to decide my next 4 years' future in Germany. There's no vision in that. They're going to go for, there's no alternative, there's no change in status quo, and where's the, I don't know, post-growth or something like that, degrowth or anything new, you know? Like, where in the disrupting the democracy discussion is the vision? Where's the next step? That's my question.
Thank you, excellent question.
Maybe
Is there other questions? Because then I would bundle, because there are 10 minutes left,
there
and I
is
would
a
take all the
question.
questions off
We
the
have a
floor.
lady in the back, she's asking a question.
There is one question there, the lady,
Okay.
and then there is
And also
one. Okay, so
Another
that's the three
question.
questions, then the panel, and
Perfect.
then finish.
Yeah, to build up on the previous question, I have a question about Operation Libero. Because you were speaking about the campaigns that you were organizing, and all three of them were anti-right-wing movements, against right-wing movements. So, like again, relating to this vision question, let's say hypothetically, if this very strong right-wing movement cools down, what would be the main agenda of your party? Is it a counter-movement, or is it a movement in itself? And if it is, then what is this big vision? And also I have a question structurally towards your organization. If, for example, it scales, if we're speaking of scaling, and if it moves from 6 employees to 200 employees, and from thousands of followers to millions of followers, don't you think you would have to face the question of power and leadership? Or do you think you would be able to continue this fluid movement on the same scale? I know the similar question was already raised before, but just to confront the numbers. Thank you.
A mic for here.
Okay, so my question is dealing with the sites like yours, where you're discussing openly about laws that are going to, with your party. And I'm wondering, in social media today, we have a big problem with things like hate comments and hate speech and how to deal with them, who's responsible, and if someone posts anything that is that hurts other people, who's responsible for taking this down? And I'm asking, do you have this problem too? And if yes, how do you deal with that? And how do you think of dealing with that in the future? Are you expecting that that's going to become more and more, or are you expecting it to become less, that people understand more if they're, if we imagine that your way of a party, like that's on the internet, with more people directly, openly participating, how do you expect that this will turn out? Is there going to be a problem? Is it a problem now, and is it going to be stronger in the future?
So I hand these 3 questions about the lack of utopia for the next 4 years and who controls the internet. I think Heiko Maas did some legislation and he wanted to go against Facebook already. And then the third question about how long can you stay fluid without turning yourself into an institution. So these were the 3 questions. Back to the floor, and then I think we can end on time.
Can I pick on
everybody
the first one?
Everybody 3 minutes. Yeah, get started.
Okay. As for the lack of vision, I completely agree. And I think in the void of politics, the only consistent vision that I have seen laid out, which is completely innovative, is Mark Zuckerberg's. He has he's actually has a political platform that has nothing to do with what I believe in, but he actually has it. It starts from education to universal basic income. He has many topics laid out, in a way in which they are credible. He has the power and money to try and influence enough people to make them happen. And that's what happens when parties, political parties, they just try to get the consensus, like in the next 5 minutes on the next 5 tweets. The result is that billionaires that have no experience in politics, that shouldn't have that role, such a role, lay out visions of how we should be living in the next 100 years or something, trying to influence how the government or how people, the next 2 billion people should be connected to the internet because they have no connection and there is no government giving them connection. Oh, I'll give it to them, free basics, unless it's not the internet, except it's not the internet. Wait, it's just more Facebook. Who cares? It's still a vision. Because we have to be connected, because artificial intelligence is going to solve everything, basically the hate speech problems. Artificial intelligence is going to solve it. Politics is saying nothing about this except pointless laws that would not solve anything. You cannot censor human beings. You cannot censor hate. Hate is part of being human. And of course it's going to show at some point somewhere. It's going to be in the streets or on social media. But again, we lack vision. So what we should be asking to politicians is just tell us not what we're going to do in the next 20 minutes, but in the next 20 years. So try to address problems, even if that doesn't bring consensus, even if it's unpopular. That's politics, being unpopular at times.
But that's what democracy cannot do. Democracy can never deal short-term costs for long-term interest. But the answer is for you, and then Carole. We have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Tempo.
Yeah, new visions. I think somehow it has to do. The lack of new visions has to do that we don't have just technical changes. We have structural changes, and the parties are still in old structures. So there's some kind of lack of matching of changes and old structures, and maybe there's also this will lead to lack of visions from old-fashioned structured parties, maybe. And so I would say if they're structured other ways, maybe there are new visions. Who controls the internet? It's a big question. I think there's just one part of the answer is that we are part of the internet. So we are the internet, so it's just like, it's not just about who controls the internet, it's just, it's about how we want to have the internet structured by ourselves. I think for me, is this the important question? And so this is all has to do with self-responsibility somehow. Then to well, you're right. I think we have started with clear values of our organizations. It's our liberal values in a society way and in an economic way. And we are, for example, legal marriage for everyone. We are just like for an open society, open economic society in sense of globalization, and a lot of other things. But you're right. We have to. At the moment, we are more in the defense. But we think like maybe we can go some time in the offense. But right now we have to fight for our institutions and for our rights. And when we will get there, I hope we will get there. To the bigger, I think everything that's getting bigger is getting more complicated. It's that simple, and it's also in an institution. I hope we have sometimes 200 employees and a lot of volunteers. But yeah, of course, I don't know how to handle them right now. But I hope they have to put this question someday.
Carole.
So I'm going to try and answer this thing about who should control the internet. And actually, it's really interesting. I was saying here, being here in Germany, Germany is actually way ahead of everybody else in the world in terms of like actually taking action and making some of these Silicon Valley companies be responsible for their content. When I was writing about Google and this really problematic search I came across, which was this around the Holocaust, did the Holocaust happen? I was getting everybody in Britain, in America, we were getting a page of results saying, no, the Holocaust didn't happen, with a Nazi website, Stormfront, at the top of it. Now, in Germany, you didn't. Okay, and Google Germany went in and they changed that. And because you've got the legal structures in place, and because you've got politicians who are prepared to stand up for this type of stuff, whereas we haven't elsewhere. So governments are actually really important. The EU has been really important, is doing this amazing thing of kind of calling Silicon Valley to account. So I sort of, this is the, Silicon Valley, you know, we were talking about it at lunch, and libertarians, they hate government, and they hate government for a reason. And the technocrats want to be in charge, they want to have the engineers in charge. And my kind of fear is that really, because we need all sorts of people feeding into this kind of brave new world we're going into, and we need political scientists and philosophers and everybody else. And that's what, you know, traditionally we do through our politicians. And that's why I think it's a really important, urgent political issue. And that's my sort of vision, is that, we, you know, it's kind of down to the people in the room to go and spread that message and to agitate and to, you know, whatever.
So, thanks to the three speakers, and you gave me the last keyword. It's all about legal structures. And I quote Madison, who wrote the American Constitution: without constitution, everything is nothing. Without constitution, nothing is it. So democracy is about legal. It's not the majority of the street. So I hand it over to Hannes, who will now go about, we were disrupting the party, but now you will rebuild a new state. And for the rebuilding of the new state, I give him a minute. But I give you also the what I had when I was having lunch with the Japanese ambassador recently, and he gave me the chart of the Japanese government for the G20, which took place in Hamburg, right? And it was a one-pager. And the one-pager was all about society 5.0. It was all about chains, food chains, security change, nutrition change, whatever change, yeah? And I looked at that one-pager, and my first thing was, where is politics in this? Yeah? Are we dealing just society 5.0? And then again the question, who has the power to make the legal framework work? Because you remember that King Louis XIV says, l'État c'est moi, but Lenin said, the society is me. And that is basically totalitarianism poor. But with that, I hand it over to the new state with which we are building. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Ulrike. Wonderful. I wanna just conclude with a very short word. We've actually tried to get, you were actually second choice. You did a great job, but we tried to get Davide Casaleggio, the guy who basically runs the tech behind Cinque Stelle, and I have his private contacts and stuff, doesn't reply a word. These guys don't talk. We had the guy who worked for Donald Trump's campaign, Gary Corby, and he was actually in the announcement, the print announcement for this conference. But it turned out during the time that Michael Flynn, formerly part of the Trump government thing, got into trouble because of Russia, it became complicated with Gary. I don't think there's any relation, but all of a sudden Gary wanted a really expensive first-class flight, and so we couldn't bring him here. There were budget limits to bringing Gary here. He would have told us about how Trump's actual targeting worked, because we wanted to have party representatives. So Carole, as well as Fabio, are actually here because these guys who are doing these party movements, they are not open to the public, and I'm a representative of the public as a journalist. They're not helping us, and these should not be our representatives, I think, thus. So, and then to the next thing, the vision thing. I think there are visions about how we could go on, and it closely relates to your question about can we even regulate the internet? I think Heiko Maas has his thing going on, and the Germans are doing a pretty fine job, but actually the internet is falling apart. This is what we're seeing. There's several internets, and there's even in the structure of the internet, there's a great thing going on called fragmentation. And but I think Malka Alder, who will be speaking tonight between 5 and 7, she's written about a new form of regulated thing in a networked societal context, and she's actually much better than me in explaining it. And she'll be speaking with Shoshana Zuboff, who coined the term commercial surveillance when I was born in 1980. And that lady is such a fine researcher and scientist and knows so much about like how datafication changes the way we live together and how we function. She'll be talking to Marco Alder and to us, so I'd be happy to have you join that discussion. I know it's late, it's sunny and stuff, but thank you.